Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
This is CampHacker. Come find our show notes and our blog for camp directors and leaders at camphacker.tv.
Good day and welcome to the podcast. This is CampHacker episode 125, recorded on the 4th of March, 2020. On today's show, the flow of the camp day. This CampHacker podcast is sponsored in part by RadTags. Designed by a former camp director and owner, RadTags is about connecting people to who they are, the camp they love, and the accomplishments they experience there. RadTags bracelets and tags help your camp community stay connected to their happiest place. Find out what RadTags has to offer your camp at zoic.ca/rad. That's zoic.ca/rad. RadTags. Be and be known. Just a quick note before we get started. You'll notice that if you're looking for the First Class Counselors podcast, it's no longer in the CampHacker feed. We've moved it over to its own location. So all you need to do is head to your favorite podcast app, search First Class Counselors, and you should find it there. Oliver and I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and gave us a review so that we can start building an audience over on that new feed. Thanks very much, Camp Pros. And now back to CampHacker.
Hello, Camp Pros. Welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Travis Allison. I run the Summer Camp Professionals group on Facebook, and I'm one of the co-owners of Go Camp Pro.
Hello, my name is Dan Weir, and I've been working in YMCA camping for over 20 years now. I work with the YMCA of Long Island, bouncing around, developing our day camps, and I've worked for quite a while in overnight camping as well, too.
My name's Joe Richards. I'm the executive director at Pierce Williams, which is a summer camp and retreat facility located in Fingal, Ontario, which is part of the United Church of Canada's summer camp and retreats group.
I'm Ruby Compton. I'm the Chief Exploration Officer for Ruby Outdoors, which just means I'm a freelance camp professional. Bounce around to lots of different camps, working day, overnight, and environmental education programs. And I'm also the Masterclass Provost for Go Camp Pro.
And we're pleased to have you back to back, Ruby. Thanks for being here again.
Thanks so much.
So today we're talking about the flow of the day at camp. I think that CampHacker listeners in particular are the kind of camp pros who are very intentional about things. And we're purposely trying to think of things that you might have not recently put intentional thought into. And sometimes the flow of the day at camp is the schedule of camp is that way because it was that way in the 60s. And it hasn't been particularly well thought of or et cetera. And so we want to talk about some of the specifics about that, about why we have a set schedule at camp, why we are intentional about these kind of things, and the different thoughts that go into it when we're planning this. How also this kind of thinking can make your life as a camp director easier, being really, really thoughtful about it. So Dan, I know that this is something that you've been thinking about recently. What has brought it up for you? What has been, what sort of things have you been thinking about?
Allow me to rant. So for me, I'm going to come at this with two angles. One, I'm going to come at it from a programming camp side, and the others, I'm going to come at it from a parent side. So programming camp, growing up and working at the same camp for a while, you really develop into your own routine. You really start thinking the way a camp schedule should be. This is how all camps should be. And it wasn't really until I started visiting other camps and seeing how the schedule really affects not only a child's day-to-day, but also their behavior. Really, it's funny. There's several books that I can think off the top of my head that talk about how the rhythms of a day and peak moments that we have during a week, but really how a schedule plays out not only affects the experience in terms of learning, like we have to look at the progression they're going through in a week, but we also have to look at the child's well-being. So there's that aspect in terms of programming and taking all those things and being intentional about it. And then from a parent standpoint, I didn't recognize how much children and ourselves are creatures of routine until I had a child. So if my family, if the kids aren't put to bed at the right time, that could be an easier going from a half hour trying to go to sleep to now an hour and a half going to sleep. And we fall into these really great rhythms in our household. But if we mess with them, it really can throw my child off. And suddenly I'm seeing behavior out of my fairly well-behaved children that I normally don't see. And just, they get everything from sleep to food to even, watching TV or doing a certain type of activity can really affect a child's day. And so that really has put a lot of thought into what the flow of camp should be. And, there's a million ways you could do it, but just being intentional about how your day is going and making sure you have enough time where the children are feeling like they're recouping, but also still excited at camp, and maxing out that schedule, but also feel like they're not going home completely spent to the point where they're just a blubbery mess when they get in the door. So there's ways we have to kind of figure that out. But yeah, so that's where it comes in. And working with our day camps here, definitely flow is something where even if the meal is not the same time every day, let's say lunchtime shifts 3 times a week, that's going to throw a camper off. And we're going to see that translate to behavior and also satisfaction in camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so grateful you opened up with that thought in particular, Dan, that how the structure of the day works and the routine, so whether or not that's repeated and kids can anticipate things, all of these affect behavior. And that's why I said in the introduction that this stuff can make your life easier if you can get this dialed in appropriately and be willing to look at, see where the problem areas and the things that you need to change.
Yeah.
So, Ruby, you've been at lots of different places and seen lots of different camp programs. What, as an opener, what are the sort of things that you've observed or that you think are important about flow, routine, et cetera?
Yeah, I want to build on the idea that Dan brought up of routine. And I think at camp, we walk this really interesting line of routine and ritual, and that there's a really beautiful relationship between the two. I think we have to resist the temptation as adults to be frustrated with routine, because if you put yourself back in the shoes of being an 8 or 9-year-old, even though you might have the routine of school, which, you wake up maybe at a similar time each day, maybe you eat the same thing for breakfast. But once you get to school, there's a significant portion of your day where new information is being presented to you. And so the routines are what ground you to the familiar when you're constantly being asked to learn new information and, understand this idea and understand this idea. And here's something that's going to blow your mind. Right. And so the way I see that transfer over to camp is I see camps that are really adamant about having brand new evening programs every year, which is great. If that's your thing, do your thing. But I've been in camps and programs where I've said, no, it's okay for us to repeat programs year to year. And some of that is me programming for me as a camper, because I loved the camp that I went to for 7 years. It was a week-long camp, and I knew Talent Show was on Wednesday and Counselor Hunt was on Thursday, and that's when our final campfire was. And the first year you do Counselor Hunt, you're terrible at it. But the 5th year you do it, where all the hiding spots are. And there's kind of that natural mastery that comes with those routines. So I think we have to remember as children, routines are actually really comforting, even if they bore us as adults. And they will, as Dan said, make your life a lot easier. And then are there opportunities to take some of those routines and transition them into rituals? And what is that relationship at camp? And all of it's being more intentional. But I think that could be an interesting discussion you could do during staff training with your staff, is to talk about what are the routines we have here at camp? What are the rituals that we have here at camp? What does ritual mean to you too, right? But that indicates a little bit more of that special, memorable moment. And we definitely want those sorts of moments to happen at camp. So getting folks to think about, how do you take brushing your teeth, which is part of the routine, can that become a ritual at camp? Can the wake up process not only be routine, but maybe it becomes a ritual as well? And if everything's a ritual, then that feels like way too much as well. So it's just an interesting relationship that I think can lead to some really fascinating discussion and lead to some aha moments for your staff.
And that idea of creating rituals, I take your point that you can overdo it, but that idea of creating rituals is so powerful because the anticipation that you described. I'm looking forward to this on a Thursday night. But also, and we just got back from the OCA conference. There's a couple of us got back from the Ontario Camp Association conference, and Michael Brandwein was there and reminded us again about the value of creating rituals that it gives kids something to look forward to. It increases their sense of belonging. It increases their confidence in stepping into a new situation or trying new things because they have all the backups of things that they just know. So safety. I want to try something new. Build up confidence. Now I'm going to take on a new challenge. So yeah, thanks, Ruby. That's great. Joe, for you, what are the sort of things that you think about or that we would encourage people to focus on?
Well, I would encourage people to focus on that, or to remember some things. And part of it is that it's not just the camper's benefit, it's the staff's benefit. We're not having staff think about new things all the time or about what time is that today when it's a base activity that should always be at the same time to slot in. I think about my daughter right now who is going to be a CIT at Pierce Williams this summer, and she has a book that she has been planning in for years, right, with ideas and things. And what she's planning on is things she knows.
Amazing. Yeah.
Right. Like so she's planning on, this is the same girl who, when she was 8 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years old, she had a book called the Book of Counselors' Real Names. And she would track down your real name and put it with your camp name. And she treated it like gold. It's not like she then went and shared it with everybody, but this is the same person. And so she is, she goes over all of the things, so she knows how to plan for stuff, and she knows that, okay, well, this is Jumpstart in the morning, and these are ideas for Jumpstart. So if we were to change that all of a sudden, all of those people who are like her planning those things away from us, because I'm not sure how you were as a kid at camp, but I know that when I was a kid and I left camp, I started planning for the next week I got to go to camp the following year. I remember one year I hid a 5/16 wrench on the day I got home.
Yes.
The 5/16 wrench was the size, I think it was 5/16. It's probably 5/8. It was the size of bolt that held the bunk beds together. And if you wanted to pull a prank where you could drop the top of the bunk bed, you needed a 5/8 wrench to pull that off. So this is the sort of thing I did. My dad never questioned where a 5/8 wrench was because he lived on a farm and had a whole bunch of them. One of the things that's come up in my time as we plan is that, yes, for behavior, like when Dan approaches this from a parent's perspective, one of the things that makes parenting so awesome is when you have a routine and you always go to bed at the right time, they go to bed at the right time, and not only does it give them a routine where they know that 7 o'clock is bedtime, you as parents know that at 8 o'clock, you two are by yourselves just doing life, right? Like, great, we can watch these shows. And trust me, I fought routine for a lot of my life. I never wanted to be caught in a routine. And so I would just do things differently. But routines are comfort. And one of the big things that's come up over the years here at Pierce, and I'm sure this happens at other camps, is program directors who have an idea to change the entire day and the setup of the day. And what I've learned and what we go to now is, instead of letting them worry about, well, here's how we would do sessions differently, and if we move lunch from 12:30 to 1 o'clock, right, and if we move dinner from 5:30 to 6:30, and I'm like, whoa, those people haven't thought through extra hours for my kitchen staff. They haven't thought through how that messes with other things. And they are trying to figure it out. But the reality is that's not what I'm paying you for as a program director. What I'm paying you for is to work within this framework that I give them, right? And so what I say is, great, breakfast is always 8, lunch is always 12:30, and dinner is always going to be 5:30. Those are non-movables. You're going to work within this system. How you do things because I don't want them to expend their energy trying to solve something that I'm not going to allow to happen anyway, or something that's not going to make it better or work more smoothly. And so the flow of the day for campers and for staff, and just for the energy that you're employing. I'm not employing a 4-month staff member on our leadership team to rethink the entire system, because that would be a waste of their energy and time. What I really want them to do is come up with amazing programs to make camp more magical for kids, right? And to give staff the right tools to succeed. And so all of this flow of the day and the framework of the day is really something that we should think about. In my mind, we as camping people can think about in September, October, November. And if we're going to do a big change, we can be like, great, yeah, let's shift meals to 9:30 a.m. Because that's when I get up, and I don't want other people to have to get up like before me. And I'm like, that's a dumb idea. So 8 a.m. it is. I once saw a camp director do that.
Right.
You don't eat till 9:30 because I don't want staff to have to get up. And I'm like, well, the kids are up.
Right.
So the staff are up.
The kids are up at 6:30.
They're the only ones sleeping in.
We should talk about sleep too. I mean, the staff do need sleep. I think they think that they're invincible. Like I did when I was 17 to 20 something. Still, near 40, I feel like I'm invincible at times, and then I pay for it the next day. And I really think that sometimes we have to be the bad guy and just say, no, it's time for bed. It's time to get some sleep. Let's do that in the morning. There's of course the need to do some programming that will be done at nighttime when it's dark outside. But I really think that that can snowball pretty quickly. And this goes for day camps too. I know a lot of day camps do overnights, and it's like, that's the night we stay up all night. And it's like, why do you do that to yourself? It's okay to have a program where the kids go to bed. There's okay to put those boundaries on it. I think there's people think of excitement with staying up all night, but it just compounds. Yeah.
And it's okay to help, especially with day camps, teaching our parents how to get their kids to go to bed, right? So is that a resource that you can create because some parents, it's not like you go through parenting school and they just teach you how to do that. So especially if you're someone who's worked in an overnight camp setting or has your own kids and has a great bedtime routine that you use, maybe it's worth putting together a little one-pager or a blog post. Because when kids don't get enough sleep at home, then we deal with a lot more behavior problems at camp. So, and I'll just throw out that I listened to one of the episodes of the First Class Counselors podcast, and they had a whole episode about bedtime routines. That was so great. Gosh, I wish I'd had that when I was a counselor. And one of the best tips they shared was this idea of for an overnight program, don't let the kids go into the cabin without the counselor going first. And so they always stop at the door, and then the counselor can establish the tone for when we go into the cabin, we're going to go silently to our bunks and we're going to get in bed and we're going to go to sleep because that's the time it is now, versus having to be in that space and manage the actual crossing through that threshold of the doorway. The counselor's having a little more say over how the kids are doing that, which I thought was so stinking brilliant. So brilliant.
Really clever. Really clever. Yeah, I definitely want to spend some time in this discussion talking about evenings and night times. But I think also for day camps, there is so much important stuff about closing off the day as purposefully as you end a day. And I've been on site at day camp where it's like, it's 3:30 and the place is sort of scatters. And then I've been at day camps where there is a closing circle and there's a closing song, and all of those things allow the rituals that we're talking about. It just makes it such a more intentional community when you end things as well as you begin them, and I think that's really, really important.
And the camps I'm working with, they do AM care and PM care, right? So here you are, you have your peak moment at the end of the day, and then you have another 2 hours of camp for some kids. Some kids aren't getting picked up till near 6. And it's funny, not only does that parent not get to see the staff member that was with them all day long, but then they get a kid that all their friends left at 4. All these things happened, and then it really cheapens the moment at the end of the day. So there, if you haven't read or even looked up, you can look on YouTube, The Power of Moments, by I think it's the Heath brothers, right?
That's right. Yep.
A fantastic book that talks about peak moments, but that's, if you have a peak moment at the end of your day, exactly what you're saying, they will have a better experience and they'll leave remembering that. That's what you can have a crappy day, but if you have a great song at the end of the day, that's what they're going to leave thinking about, energized to come back next morning. So I can't emphasize that enough.
Important point there, Dan, is that PM and AM care should somehow, you need to program that to be totally different. Right, like it's just a different thing. And trust me, I worked at a before and after school program, so I never had to deal with the in between time. But what I did before school or after school was nothing like school. And camp people can fall into, I'm sure day camp people can fall into this trap where they just treat it like another part of the day and just extend programming versus creating something magical. It's like this idea that. This idea I've had for years of putting a box up in your dining hall for a rainy day, and it just says break in case of rainy day. And what it is it's like the world's best program in a box, but you only use it on rainy days, and you have 2 or 3 that you can put in. And it would happen so rare for us that kids would talk about it because they'd be like, man, I hope it rains this week because we get to play in the box, but like just something different.
That's amazing. That is a great idea.
Anytime. Take it and run with it.
This episode of the CampHacker podcast is sponsored by Rad Tags. Rad Tags is outfitting camps with personalized keepsakes that speak without saying a word. Rad Tags allows you to show someone they belong, building a relationship that goes beyond their last day at camp. With the goal of helping camps create awesome recognition and affiliate programs that last beyond the summer, Rad Tags is doing a monthly giveaway for Go Camp Pro listeners. Just email your answer to the following question to matt@gocamp.pro and be entered to win 5 silicone bracelets with the Rad hand sign. Each month, we'll pick a new winner. This month's question is, what is the most sought-after camp prize or award in your camp community? Don't forget, email your answer to matt@gocamp.pro with Rad Tags contest in the subject line. To find out more about how Rad Tags can elevate your camp program, visit zoic.ca/rad. That's zoic.ca/RAD. Rad Tags. Be and be known. So, I think there's more to talk about evenings. I certainly have some stuff that I'm interested in. But during the day, what are important beats to hit in a camp day? What are the things? Meals, as Joe said, a known and acceptable meal time is one. But what are some of the other beats to hit?
Yeah, I think in the morning you need to frame the day. I think whether you frame the day with one of your values, one of your tenets of your program, reinforces what the day is going to be. If it's not that, just giving a message to all your campers saying, today is all about trying new things. Just it gives a good framing for the staff to then go back if they're having issues with kids that day and just be like, hey, today we're all about trying new things, so let's just try it. It gives more ammo for our staff. Also just kind of separates the days from just becoming this minutiae of here I am for 8 weeks if you're doing that type of camp program. So I think that is a really good beat in the morning to hit. Meals, I love what Joe was saying about these are absolutes. They need to happen at these times. I think programming wise, you really need to have a good balance of active versus inactive programming, and really kind of a good pulse of that. So crafts is a good way of slowing down the day. They're sitting there concentrating on one thing, versus being active the rest of the day. Gets them inside a little bit, typically gets them in shade. So I think you have to look at that in your days. And then, I know a lot of camps do programming differently where they do it more. Some do more elective based, some do it more group based, some do it more just bounce around to what you want to go to. I don't know what a good term for that is, but it's really making sure that they have a healthy diversity of programming as well. Like that they're actually trying different things. And I think that is important in terms of a routine in a day. Just if nothing else, if you do the same thing all day long, by your seventh hour, you're not, doesn't feel as exciting as it did the day before. Even if the kid just loves doing that. I used to work with an equestrian camp, and it was horseback riding 75% of the day, but one period of the day they all went swimming. It just changed up the day. I can't emphasize that enough, to keep things fresh in that way. But those are all important aspects. And then I think you need to have some peak moments in your routine. So,
and I think you appreciate peaks, and this is going to be something I talk about when we talk about evening stuff. You appreciate those peak moments more when you have the quiet times, because camp can tend to be just loud, screamy, yelly, jumping around songs and games like that, and that we have to be conscious of kids who don't love that but still love camp, and just that for kids to get the most out of those moments, they have to have come from a quiet moment to lead into a more excited moment. So that's really smart, Dan. I love that. The other thing I want to pick up on in terms of beats of the day, and I think this is going to become incredibly more important in the next generation of summer camp, is that we have to be aware of weather, heat in particular, and plan around that we can provide a space for kids to cool down, whether it is in the buildings that they're in. Some older camps, that'll be hard, whether it's water activities, whatever it is, so that they are in shade as much as possible, or recovering in the shade, recovering in mists of water, something. It has to be a big part of how the flow of a day goes, that we're super conscious of heat going forward, I think.
I think that's an important point. We for things like that, like the flow of the day, we're lucky enough to have a couple of air-conditioned buildings, and we'll rotate activities through those buildings, as well as the pool and other things. I was recently on a build in Belize last week, and we built out of compressed earth blocks. What I was fascinated by, and this is something that which live the majority of, well, not the majority, I live in a temperate climate, so that the temperature ranges a lot. In Belize in February, it was 100 to 110 degrees for 3 days in a row, and you're doing hard physical labor. And one of the best parts was the second last day, I walked into this compressed earth building, which is only 12 feet by 12 feet, and the temperature difference was 20 degrees between outside of the building in the sun and inside of the building. And I was like, this is a great reason just to build with compressed earth block, because the thermal mass is protecting without air conditioning. It was brilliant. But that sort of flow and making sure that you have all of those things sort of arranged and worked out, because with water games, it can also lead to drought, right? You can run wells dry, and so you need to be really mindful of a lot of those things. But yeah.
The YMCA camp that I kind of grew up at as a staff member, one of the things that I really appreciated there, even though we had some program changes over the 7 years I was there, you always had a consistent swim time when you worked with a certain age group. So pretty much the entire time that I worked there, whenever I was working with the 4th and 5th grade girls, we always had swim time right after lunch. And just that anchor was really nice. And I knew that, the youngest kids had it first thing in the morning, and the oldest kids had it the last period of the day. And just knowing that, and this is a camp of 600 people, kids at least, that was super duper helpful. And our rule there was, like, if the heat index got over 100, everything became a water activity, which, I look back and I'm like, whew, we wasted a lot of water spraying down kids on the giant swing. But, you do what you got to do to keep them cool.
Keep them safe.
Yeah. And kind of required breaks. And I would add to that, as much as we are requiring breaks, for heat sensitivity, I think looking at your proportion of structured program, focus time with that unstructured, that transition time. Have you considered your transition time as a program? And what is the experience that you are expecting kids to have in that time, right? Is it a time for them to unplug? Is it a time for them to have an introvert moment? Are there opportunities for them to walk from this side of the field to that side of the field alone if they don't want to be walking right next to somebody, talking to somebody all the time? Like, do they have those kind of opt-in, opt-out moments? Now, like when I first started working at camp, I was like, you engage and structure and you are with the kids all the time and always leading something. Like, and I was that staff member who was always leading a song or always leading a game, or, there was never this downtime, just kind of like hanging out side by side. And that's a skill that I learned later on. That now I do a lot more walking alongside the kids and what do they discover and what's interesting to them. Or I just walk alongside them and be quiet and see where they take the conversation. And if it's walking quietly together, cool. And if it's they, start telling me about something going on at camp, cool. Then I can be the leader that they need and they are directing me there versus me forcing my leadership on them. And it's I think it's a really tricky balance to learn and to understand, because from the boss standing over watching that happen, they may be like, why aren't you talking to your kids? Why aren't you asking them questions? So having some conversation around that's really helpful, and making sure your staff understand that, some unstructure is okay. We had at that same YMCA camp, we had a campsite time on our schedule that was the unstructured play time, like the unstructured play in the woods, build your campsite where you eat lunch. And people built chairs and, fire pits and all kinds of stuff. But there were some counselors that were like, I've no idea what to do with this, because, more and more we're seeing people who just didn't go play outside. So we may need to teach that skill.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ruby. Great point.
And that's something I've been trying for a few years, this idea that we don't need to fill every moment. Because if you fill every moment, it's you're not giving them any time to sort of just be, right? Like just be in nature or be by themselves or be, right? So, because, right, when we grew up as counselors, it was fill it. Always keep them busy. Don't let them think.
Joe, were you taking apart bunk beds with your counselors? Probably not. Like maybe you were. I don't know, but I might
have seen a counselor do that trick, and I might have. And that's like, it was the 70s and 80s. There was a lot of stuff that went on in the 70s and 80s that have led me to be like, we shan't do that at camp in the 20-aughts, in 2010s. And in 2020, that will never happen.
Yeah. But I mean, that's the point that I see is the, like, I think back on my camp memories and what are the things that really stand out. Very few of them were in that structured program time. Doesn't mean get rid of it, but what were the moments that really stick out? So many of them were in those transitions or unstructured time.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, whenever I talk to camp professionals that are really about free play, whenever I talk about routine, sometimes they're like, oh, well, that's completely opposite of what I'm talking about. I'm like, no, that's not at all. Like I give my kids tons of free play time, but routine is safety. And when people feel safe, they have a better experience. And it's as simple as that. In order to grow, you need a basis of feeling safe. And we haven't actually talked about, like, if someone's on the spectrum, how much routine they need and they thrive, and how many campers we have come to camp that are on the spectrum that are undiagnosed, that you don't know, family might be in denial. They might not want to tell you, or they might know and they just didn't tell you. But that is just such a key aspect of what we do, is having that routine for that reason.
And as more of our staff and campers come to us with and sort of generalized anxiety disorder, it's the same thing. Like, camp is a change of routine, but once a routine's established, that flow can help them feel more confident and try new things. And just because, again, they have to go back to the touch point of the routine or ritual.
Well, it's funny, if you think about it, last camp I was at, 2-week long camp experiences. The first week, kids would get homesick, and we would always say, just get them to Saturday, and they will like the second week flies by. And that's because by Saturday they've learned the routine. It's not tricky. It's just they feel comfortable and they feel part of things.
Yeah, and if you run a camp that runs longer sessions, then I think you have more flexibility towards the end of a session to play with the routine a little bit. There's great purpose to that. So I don't think camp day has to be exactly the same for a 4-week session or 6 or 8-week session, that there is value in breaking it up. It gives a different energy and a change is good as a rest in so many different situations.
When I worked at a camp that had a 4-week session, for anybody over 10, they had to come for 27, 28 days. And so I literally would break it down into, you're 10, you're in camp for 12 days, you're on a canoe trip for 5 days, then you're back in camp. By the end of that 12 days, like Dan was saying, they know the routine. Canoe trip's going to be new to them, but by that point they've been walked through it. And then when they come back after a canoe trip, they feel like they're experts for the last little bit of camp. And I let little 10-year-olds think that as we walk through the rest of the session with them. It also helped them break through talking about being missing home and those things. So because if you can get them to understand that it's just broken down into these small segments, then it's easier for them to see that it'll come to an end.
Thank you. So I want to spend just the last couple of minutes of the discussion on evenings. And I think that early mornings it's the beginning of the day and the end of the day, either day camp or overnight camp, is really where a lot of special things happen. And I think that you can be really intentional about the flow and really, really punch up that feeling of camp as such a special place. And it happens at both ends of the day. In particular, I'd like to talk about evenings. And I'm going to present an idea that most camp directors will say, well, that would never work at our camp. But one of the things that we did was 4 out of 7 days, there was an hour of staff development after dinner. So 1/5 of the staff would take all the kids and the LITs and play some games in a fairly contained area, while the rest of the staff was doing some personal and team development stuff. And 4 out of 7 days we did that, and that was an amazing part of what made our community so intentional and what made our community connection so intense, because we were able to prioritize that. I get that lots of people think that can't be done, but I would challenge you to try to find those times once or twice a week for your staff where there is something that they're away from kids, they're together, they are learning together. It's not just rest, time off, here's an hour to play on your phone. It is, here's an hour in this day. For us, it was always right after supper, that is about you as a person. And we understand that we're building this camp by building you in those times. So I'd offer that challenge. I know lots of overnight camps. I know lots of day camps that also have figured out a way to find some staff time, whether it's called a meeting, but it's time in a day that you can do that if you're creative about where the kids are contained and who's entertaining them, et cetera. But finding some personal team development time in a week is important. For us, that was almost every day. But that's something. But then I think it's also important to structure around a big activity in an overnight camp and then some purposeful closing. And I'm always surprised at the number of camps that don't do a closing. Is like the big camp game finishes and then everybody dissipates. And it's up to the individual counselors. And I think there should be things that individual counselors do at the end of the day to bring a day to a close. But I think as a community, it's so important to say goodbye to that day and thanks to each other for being in it together. And so I would encourage camps to figure out a way to have a closing moment as well. For us, that was always about half an hour to 45 minutes of campfire singing together, which also had flow. There's a lot of really big intention around how campfires work. What other evening things do you think you've seen that you liked or you think are important to include?
Yeah, I think Evening is also a perfect opportunity to be silly. Like you've had a long day together. Usually you're a little more uninhibited by the end of the day, and it can really be a great bonding moment. Everything from a lip sync to a sing along to any game, but just silliness is infectious. So if the staff are not doing it, the staff aren't being silly, then the kids aren't going to be silly, and the staff aren't going to be silly unless they can see that with their directors. If you have directors that aren't comfortable with that, then why are you doing this? But yeah, I just think silliness, and especially in a world where everyone's afraid of what image is going to be posted online of them, to be at camp in an inclusive place, is just awesome, and a good relief and a good laugh.
I think about, again, on my own camp experience, something really special was campfire every night. And so the camp that I went to for about 7 years, we had campfire every night. And then when I went to a couple other camps and they didn't have campfire every night, I was very confused. I was like, how do you go to bed? You haven't sung your songs and had your lesson and, talked about this stuff. And also recognizing that with weather and climate, we may be in a world of less and less fire. So what is that thing, or what do you come around? What is that place? And I think that may be the direction to consider is are there places on your camp where you only go at the end of the day, or you only go when it's nighttime? I think that's a way you can create that special feeling of this is something special, a ritual we do at camp to close out our day. So what is that place at your camp? For day camp, again, how much I've learned. And then I look back on my counseling years and I'm like, oh, that's why they were having us do that. For our YMCA camp, we had a bead ceremony and all the different beads had different colors. And so we were encouraged to sit down with our campers at the end of every day and do a 10-minute, you get this bead and you get this bead because, and you get the caring bead and you get the participation bead, and they added them to their bracelet. And, if you missed it one day, then that was the kids would remind you about it. You owe us 2 beads. And then I, for a long time with my campers, had the rule of, or a reward, I guess I should say, that if they were great throughout the whole day, then we would have scream time. And it was just straight up, you just get to yell at the top of your lungs for 15 seconds, because how much do kids get told to be quiet? And at camp, when we're on so many hundreds of acres and there's plenty of space, oh yeah, it was 10 to 15 seconds of just and I'd let out all my frustrations too. And that was a reward that they got. And then I'd be like, all right, go get on the bus. See you tomorrow. So yeah, just thinking about what those little rituals are, those little special places that you can take them. But I think some way to wrap up your day together, be that at 3:00 in the afternoon, at noon, or, just before you're going to bed, is really important.
I grew up at a camp where it's very structured, right? So, you do evening program. The important part of that was that it was staff free time as well. So we were supervised by program staff and by CITs, but the counselors all had that time off, and they had a time off as a group. So I've always tried to get that back for camp here, is that staff would take a break as a group, but that's not the way that it works out. It's not a hill I need to die on. But the importance of hanging out in the staff lounge with 20 other counselors and just chatting and just hanging out, or going and doing archery with 3 of your fellow counselors during that time, right? You're allowed to do whatever you want as long as it's not interrupting the evening program. We would go from that to campfire every night, right? And then it would be campfire every night. And then we also did to snack. And after snack, we did vespers, right? Evening vespers to show, right? Because we were a Christian camp, but it was a sort of a way, a meditation at the end of the day to calm us and quiet us, and then do some final, it's time to go brush our teeth. And then we all went off on our way. So I think that is routine, but also as a counselor, you want to be routine in, I never had my overhead light on when I was by the time I was a second-year counselor, I was just I'll have this small light on, not the overhead light in the cabin, because I want them to feel it's a quiet place they're coming into at night, different than during the day. So setting up all those routines is hugely important.
And I think you actually hit on an interesting point that I think faith-based camps tend to do that evening campfire, that Vesper, that wrap up. I think they tend to have it more often ingrained in their culture. And because they are typically aligning with some sort of religious teaching, it's just more logical and built into that culture. But there's totally ways to do that without there being a religious overtone. So if you're struggling with like, how do we create that at our camp, you may want to look at some of the faith-based camps in your area and see what they're doing. They may have some cool ideas that you can adapt.
And or call me, because I love that stuff. I talk to anybody for free about that. That is my favorite camp moments. All happen there, and having done both kinds of camps, faith-based and not. There's two kinds of camps in the world. I've brought it into non-faith-based camps and seen remarkable culture changes because of that. That is such a great place. Ruby, thanks for the setup on that. Good ender. So if you have any questions or comments, you can follow up with folks. Go to camphacker.tv/podcast and find our show notes there and our contact information. We are going to end us off today with our tool of the week.
Tool of the week.
So if you are just one of Ruby's Instagram followers and are follower here to this podcast and it's your first time listening to CampHacker, then you should know our tool of the week is something that we ask each panelist to come to the show with something that makes them be a better camp director. And I'm going to go first because I'm also going to do Dan's. Dan had to leave because he has to drive home. Dan's is a great tool, an awesome friend to camps. Dr. Tina Bryson and her writing partner, Dan Siegel, have a new book out called The Power of Showing Up. And Dan says it's an amazing book for staff training. I'm looking forward to hearing Tina talk about it at Tri-State. I'm pretty sure she's presenting on this at Tri-State, and have read her other books and had great conversations with Tina. I don't know Dan, but Tina is very camp connected, and all of the stuff really applies. So thank you, Dan, for that tool of the week. And again, if you have follow-up questions for Dan, go to camphacker.tv/podcast and look up the contact information for Dan. And we appreciate him staying on for an extra hour at work before his drive home to do the show with us. Joe, what's your tool?
My tool of the week is something called HighBid. And HighBid, I've just shared the screen if you're watching the video. HighBid is an online auction sort of site that I found a ton of auction places use. It's just easy for them. So there's two things you need to know. This is we're looking at a map of North America essentially. And if I was Ruby in North Carolina and wanted to see what was closer, I could see that there's a ton of auctions close to where I am, depending on what we're looking for, right? So there's just, in each of these pins on the map is an auction. There's thousands and thousands. And so I sign up for emails from my local auction sites and get them to come back to me, and then I can ignore most of them. Some of them are fine jewelry, returned items. And then you just sift through that and pay attention when something amazing comes. Like today, there was a party rental company going out of business. And I was like, oh, party rental company. And we want to get into weddings. So I'm thinking tables, chairs, tablecloths, linens, outdoor tents. They're auctioning off a 40 by 100 foot outdoor tent. And I'm like, I don't need it.
That would be awesome.
But how awesome would it be to have, right?
Yeah.
And so part of it is some of these auctions will do online shippings, but a lot of them you need to pick up as well. So you need to be close to where they are. And I had this thought because I sent those auctions out to a bunch of local camp people who I know don't think the same way I do. And I'm like, if you're looking for stuff for camp, this is the cheapest way you're going to buy it. Just go to go to auction sites and sign up for them. And close to yourself. So I'm in near London, Ontario, and there are currently 23 auctions in London, Ontario, in my area, and so it might mean you need to pay attention, right? You need to know what you're buying. You need to know if you need to go see it, right? Because oftentimes I've bought stuff that I regret, but for $30, I thought I was buying a box big enough to do firewood, but it wasn't nearly that big, and so we then left it somewhere for a while. And then I bought a treasure chest for program at camp, and it wasn't a giant treasure chest, but it will work well. So high bid, I would sign up and then figure out what auctioneers are close to you, and they'll come right into your email inbox, and then you just sort through them.
So Joe, are they on-site auctions that you're getting notified that you have to go to the auction, or is this an auction where you have access to bid and see the items, the photos of the items?
With high bid, you have the ability to bid and see them. But what I'm saying is that I sign up on the auctioneer's website to get those notifications. So high bid doesn't share them with me without me signing up on Shackleton's auctions or Stories auctions. And so I'm always looking. We have 2 commercial kitchens. I'm always looking for kitchen equipment, things like stainless steel bowls, anything, and cutting boards and things. And so I have found that the best is to sign up for an account, then find out who your local auctioneers are, sign up for their emails because they are the ones who are marketing their own auctions. Right. And then just pay attention to what's close to you. I'm not always willing to drive to Toronto or Guelph or Windsor to pick something up. But the reality is if I can buy a convection oven for $600, it's worth renting a car and driving somewhere for 2 hours, for a day, if I can buy a full commercial convection oven for $200 or for $600.
That's great. Ruby, what's your tool?
My tool is The Nonprofit Leadership Team by Fisher Howe. And this is a fantastic book. So I've worked at a couple different nonprofits in my time, and then I work with a few now. And this book does an excellent job discussing how your board is responsible for governance, and then your administrative and leadership team is responsible for management. And it just does such a good job of really outlining that relationship, and I highly recommend for folks who are stepping into an executive director role, or if you're doing any board development, or if you're contemplating becoming a 501c3 or a nonprofit, whatever, any of those things, I recommend checking this out, as well as just, I was never in any of those kind of roles, really. We were in one organization I was at, we were working on kind of updating our board. But even just reading that helped me have some clarity on what that relationship should look like. And it's a pretty quick little read, actually. This is the 2004 version, so there may be a newer version out there in the world. But, you're talking less than 200 pages and a pretty easy read. So definitely recommend.
Pretty good. Thank you. My tool is an app for Zoom. You can sign up for free. It has it's like freemium model, so you can use it a few times for free. It is the website fireflies.ai, and you give it permission to access your Zoom account, and it will show up as another person in your Zoom meeting. And what it's doing, there's no people involved in this. It's using machine learning to transcribe your Zoom meetings. So helpful for us because we want to get better at doing transcripts of the show, of all of our shows. So we're experimenting with it for that purpose, but you might want to do it for staff interviews. If you do an interview and you need to show someone else the person's responses, I can think of a million things, board meeting minutes, etc., that Fireflies AI can help you out. And it's surprisingly fast. And I would say based on the times we've been using it in the last week, it looks like it's like 90% accurate. And that is really enough to give us a gist of what happens in a call. And you can go to a certain point in the text where the text sort of falls apart, doesn't make sense, and it'll play the audio at the same time. So you can correct it on the page if there is a little blurby thing, or you're using a made-up word like CampHacker and it doesn't get what that is. You can fix that. So fireflies.ai is my tool of the week. All right, Joe, if people have questions for you, how do they follow up?
They don't. No, I'm just teasing.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, anytime. They can email me. They can find out more at two different websites. So yoyojoe.com, yoyojoe.com, or campisbetter.com, which is Pierce Williams' site. And Joe at either of those things gets an email sent to me, and that is the best way to follow up. I'm trying to ignore social media.
All
I'm
right.
doing a damn good job of it. I do say so myself.
Thanks for being here, Joe. Hope you feel better.
Thanks.
Ruby, how about you?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter, RubyLynn85. I'm also on Instagram at Ruby Outdoors. I'm also the person behind the at Women in Camping Instagram page, so you can check that out. And then as far as being in touch, Ruby at gocamp.pro is a great email to find me.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ruby. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks. It's always an honor to be alongside with you all.
Thank you so much. So again, show notes, camphacker.tv/podcast. This is episode 125. And you can find the show notes there. I don't know if this is something that's going to be obvious to you, but we just changed the podcast hosting, and Matt and I have been testing it, and we think there's been no interruptions to your regular service. Nice thing about running a podcast in 2020 is all those things are pretty easy these days. So please let me know, Travis at gocamp.pro, if there's any concerns about your podcast feed. Likely between the time you heard our last regular recording when Ruby was the guest last time, you will have heard two other shows between then and when you hear this recording. We're putting out two pieces, one a past show on communicable diseases at camp, because we're recording this in March, and as the coronavirus stuff is getting more and more intense. And we're going to be putting into the podcast feeds an interview that I am doing with one of our alumni who's an epidemiologist. So if you've heard those and have any questions, please again follow up Travis at gocamp.pro. And we're looking to put out, we're hoping, we have a partnership lined up that we are going to work on putting out an infographic for camps on what they should do or that they can give to their parents. We're still tuning that, but that should be out by the time you hear this episode. So if you haven't got that, go to camphacker.tv/podcast, look for episode 125 and the ones in between 124 and 125, you'll find that download there. So that's a resource that we hope you can make good use of. So thank you to Ruby, thanks to Dan and Joe for being here, and thanks for the evening, friends.
The Camp Hacker podcast is brought to you by Beth and Travis Allison, summer camp leadership training and marketing consultants. Thanks for listening. Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.
Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.